Hi, I'm Tom Gilson, Associate Editor of Against the Grain, and I'm here at the Charleston Conference at the Francis Marion Hotel in the Penthouse Suites. And I'm joined by Audrey Powers, who is the Associate Librarian at the University of South Florida, and we're here to talk to Adam Murray, who is the Dean of Library Services at Murray State University. Dr. Murray, we're delighted to have you here in the Penthouse.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Thanks.
The first thing I wanted to ask you about, today you just finished presenting at the conference, and you talked about two studies that you all at Murray State have done. And the first one dealt, and I didn't realize this at first, but it was actually a survey of library deans.
Correct.
And what you were looking at was focusing on the correlation between the alignment of library services and resources with high-impact practices for student engagement and retention. What exactly does that mean? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So through the National Survey of Student Engagement, the NESE, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, they have a very large national data set now of student engagement information. And they've been able to identify 10 practices as high-impact practices. That these have a noticeable impact on student engagement, and through that they have noticeable impact on student retention. So these educationally purposeful activities that require a lot of time, a lot of effort to be spent outside of the traditional formal classroom in order for students to complete them, when they're done well, tend to result in students being more integrated with their academic course of study, and then turning around and they finish, they graduate, so which means that they decided to remain enrolled. So the 10 high-impact practices served as the conceptual framework for the study of library deans, to get a sense of, okay, well, we know, if you look through the list of 10 high-impact practices, a lot of them are very familiar. A lot of our institutions have these kinds of things in place: writing intensive courses, or learning communities, internships and undergraduate research programs, and service learning and things like that. So, we have these at our institutions already to some extent, and to some extent libraries are already supporting these. To what extent are we deliberately supporting them? To what extent are we looking at these high-impact practices and knowing, whatever of those 10 at our institutions are kind of a priority? Each institution will pick and choose different ones to really focus on. So of those 10 and the ones that are focused on at specific institutions, are we, as library deans, guiding our services and resources in such a way that they are deliberately in alignment with these high-impact practices?
I see. What kind of results did you see from the study?
So overwhelmingly, they are. They are doing this. Each of the interactions between, there were three library scales: library collections, library facilities, and library instruction. And so each respondent was asked to then rate their perception of the level of alignment between each of those three scales: collections, facilities, and instruction, with each of the 10 high-impact practices. So overwhelmingly, each of those interactions, when we put that through Pearson correlation coefficients, when we calculated that, there was a moderately strong positive correlation with a significance level of less than 0.01. So it's a highly statistically significant, moderately strong positive correlation. Within that, there were particular services or resources or particular high-impact practices that had a stronger correlation. So collaborative assignments and projects, for example, which, when you stop and think about the library's role, makes a lot of sense. That high-impact practice was very highly correlated with each of the three library scales. And then, for example, library instruction was also highly correlative with certain other high-impact practices.
Okay, well, so I'm glad to hear that. I'm a former reference librarian, and we used to do a lot of BI, so that's great. Yeah. And I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Now, the second study, I found it was a study that measured the library's impact on student retention, and I found that to be particularly intriguing. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So our data collection started 2 years ago, in 2012, and we started compiling a data set of use at the individual level, looking at our students logging into our electronic resources. Are they logging into our Iliad system? Are they, as a proxy for being in the building, are they logging into a computer in one of our computer labs? So that's not the best indicator of physical presence in a library building, but it's at that point it was the closest thing that we could get. And a number of other data elements like that. Are they checking out items? Are they in an instruction session? So collecting individual use at the individual level, tracking that, and putting together a very large data set. As part of that, we were also gathering what time of the semester they were doing that. So were they logging into a computer in August? Were they logging into a computer in September, in October, November, December? So we were able to track this at the individual level for each of these different service points that the library provides. And then we got with the registrar's office, and the registrar's office crosswalked that for us to their information on retention. So we were then able to calculate odds ratios.
Okay, and there was obviously a positive correlation.
There was, yes. So overall, the overall finding was that any use of any library service or resource resulted in a likelihood of an increased likelihood of 96% that students were going to be retained. There was students that use the library are twice as likely to be retained as students that don't.
Yes, that's pretty significant.
It really is.
You said during your talk that you've talked to your provost about this, and has that increased your funds? Do you know? Can you tie an increase in funds to your ability to do this kind of?
Yeah, so we just finished this study over the summer, and too late for the setting of the new budget for the current fiscal year.
Okay.
But, so there hasn't been anything in the current fiscal year. But one of the items that we're beginning to track use of is a communication center that we have within our library. And as an example, our provost is much more aware of these types of academic support services as having a potential impact on retention. So while we don't have results on use of this center yet, he knows that we're beginning to track that, and he's familiar with our other results. And so we have a little bit of a funding crisis with that center for staffing. And so he's already indicated his willingness to really do two things: to contribute some funding to patch it together for this fiscal year, and has also put that in his budget priority list to go to the president. So there should be some new funding, permanent line item funding in the budget in the next fiscal year.
Okay.
So while we don't necessarily have data particularly on that one, that was our first ask, and we were able to still kind of interweave our rhetoric about impact on retention into this ask, and it's helped carry it forward.
Right.
So.
Good. And in what other ways can libraries utilize user analytics to refine services and resources? I think you talked about that in closing the loop.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things, and I didn't talk about this at all in my session, because of the infrastructure that we had to collect data, we could not collect data on faculty at the same time. We were gathering user ID numbers and user logins and matching all of that into our data set. So faculty and staff use of the library was also pulled in as part of that data set. So as a separate outcome of all of this, we've looked at faculty use of library resources and services, and have provided to the deans breakdowns on faculty use per department and per college, so that they can see how their college ranks compared to all the other colleges within the university.
Oh,
and
interesting.
then within that, each dean then got a report on each of their departments and how their departments compared to each other, looking at our faculty logging into electronic resources, our faculty checking out items, our faculty putting in ILL requests. And so those were actually the three primary ones that we were looking at, because those are the ones that really
show a good picture of library use.
So we've been able to have some really good conversations with the deans and the department chairs, really on kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. The high use departments. This is great. You guys are really using us. What else can we do? What more do you need? How can we continue to really make sure that we're aligning our services and our resources with what you need? And then also with the opposite end of the spectrum, these are the departments where we had one faculty member out of the entire department that logged into our Easy Proxy to log into an electronic resources. So we were able to pull, here are the journal lists, the journal titles that we have for your department. Here are the databases that support your discipline. Here is the amount of money that go towards purchasing books. What are we missing? What resources are we not providing? Do you want to go through this list? Are there things that we no longer need to get? We should switch out. What does it take to get you guys to use these resources? So
in many ways, it's become a marketing tool for you all.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Are you using any of this data analysis, this user analysis, to help formulate the library's strategic plan?
So as I mentioned in the session, we have a brand new president. And so our president does what every new president does and starts a new strategic planning process. So we're not doing a strategic plan within the library right now because and we actually have library faculty sitting on each of the different subcommittees for the university's overall strategic plan. So our results are being looped into those subcommittees to some extent when the right opportunity comes up. For example, I am on the student success subcommittee for our university strategic plan, and I will be working this kind of analytics into that process. So once the overall university strategic plan is in place, and we've used our information to kind of filter up into that, then each of the units will have a responsibility to develop our own based on that model. So once we have been given that charge at the dean level for the colleges and the units, then within the library we'll be taking our data and developing our own strategic plan in alignment with the universities.
Well, that sounds tremendous, because that really is the key for a library's success, to be able to align its mission with the overall university's mission. That's the key. From the analysis that you guys have been doing, can you tell if there's been a direct correlation between library collections and student retention and success? And have you done any analysis? You have mentioned, you've talked a little bit about faculty, but have you been able to analyze whether faculty success is being impacted by library collections?
Right. So we have not looked at faculty success at this point. I mentioned this in the presentation, that retention is a low-hanging fruit because we were able to get known and existing data from the registrar on retention. It's recorded, whether or not a student comes back. Faculty success, and I've heard this at numerous other sessions during the conference, it's difficult to wrap your hands around. Faculty aren't reporting when they publish things, or you don't necessarily get the information about grants that they're able to secure. So that politically and infrastructure-wise, that's something that we're going to do, but it's going to take a little bit longer to kind of build that infrastructure to be able to capture some of the indicators of faculty success. But once we do, then absolutely.
That sounds like something you're going to explore then.
Yes. Back to the collections question, there were really two findings that I highlighted, and that's that logging into electronic resources and checking out items. The two of them, through our study, the odds ratio prediction was that checking out items or logging to electronic resources increased the likelihood of retention by 36% for checking out items.
Wow, that's tremendous.
And I believe it was 24%, 25% for logging into electronic resources. So we're able to say, here are our collections, and use of those have this kind of likelihood. Result in
And then
this kind of
tying them
likelihood.
to students who stay.
Right.
Retention.
Exactly. Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
And looking at your annual assessment report, you talked about the library as the intellectual community of the university, which I think is very interesting, because of course we all know that.
Right.
But how does the library go about fulfilling such a role, and how do you say that to a provost or the board of trustees or whomever?
Right. I actually feel like the library has never been at a better place in terms of describing itself as the heart of the university. I know that it's always been kind of that's the usual rhetoric, and in fact there have been studies on whether or not university provosts or presidents still believe they will say that, but they don't necessarily put the funding towards it. So one of the things that I had a chance to do, partially in response to this study, but also as part of a renovation that we recently completed for a quiet study floor in our library, our new president was so impressed by the floor and by the study that when I asked if we could have the grand opening for the floor to coincide with our Board of Regents retreat and to take place as a reception after the retreat was over with, he thought it was a fantastic idea. And the fact that our building has the same name as the chair of our board didn't hurt. So we had all of the regents, plus faculty and staff and administrators, other deans. And we also invited students, and we got a good crowd of students. So it's really rare that you have an opportunity where you have a dedication or a grand opening kind of event, and everybody's walking around in their suits and their ties and you know, doing the formal kinds of things, but to have students present too. And so I did not waste that opportunity to have a very mixed audience in terms of talking about the continued role of the library and how, you know, more now than really ever, libraries can be the heart of the university. You know, that we used to say that, but at the time, you know, it was really a place where you came and you got your book and you left. And now it's really become, you know, at least at my institution, it is the place that students are. I mean, our door counts are, you know, are through the roof, and you know, so that it has become the academic twin to the student center, and that is where students spend their time. And so physically, the library is able to be the heart of the university and the common place for everyone. And then using data like this, you can really drill down and figure out how you can better support. I mean, we've always talked about the fact that some disciplines want books and some disciplines want journal articles. Well, now we have some data on it, some really solid data, to be able to start, you know, talking about redistributing our budget a little bit better and really, you know, pulling that into alignment. So you can just kind of factor this in at all those different levels. And really, you know, just improve it. And of course, the follow-up is you have to close the loop and connect the dots with people to drive this home that, you know, we're not only are we very relevant, but we're very responsive to your needs, and we're doing that based on real information and data. So it's truly data-driven decision making.
So have you found anything that you need to improve and have improved, like change course of, you know, change direction of your core, you know?
Right. So, you know, this budget year, we shifted some additional funding into book purchases for specific departments that, you know, had an obvious demonstrated high use of the book collections. And we're able to have that conversation with those departments that have told us for years that they don't care about books, but they just did not want to let go of their book allocation, you know, to say, okay, well, you know, you're not using it. You know, here is finally the proof that you're not using it. And here, so we're going to start separating our budget out a little bit better according to format and discipline and desired collection strength and things like that. So, and it made that conversation a lot easier.
Yeah. Interesting. Though the question is, if you were sitting in our place, what question would you ask yourself?
So, what next? You know, what would be the next data element? What would be the next study? And one of the things I mentioned was employment. A lot of institutions, and this is coming because of the federal mandate and the federal scorecard that is supposed to be released, I think, this month, if it's not already been. I haven't checked in a couple of days. But the federal scorecards that rank institutions based on post-graduation success. Are students getting a job? Are they able to pay off their student loan debts? Are they taking the GRE and getting a placement into graduate school? So all of our institutions are going to be struggling to capture this data because, you know, different institutions have varying success at doing this. So I think that this is a wide open field for libraries to begin exploring.
It's really, and that would really be saying something.
Yeah.
If libraries could point, not only are we helping to retain students, but look at the success of these retained students. Post-graduation success.
But I think that those numbers are difficult to acquire because you have to keep the line of communication open with the student, and they move a lot.
They do.
Or the former students.
Right.
And so it would be hard to capture that data, I would think.
It's very hard.
You were tracking them anonymously, so you really wouldn't, you know who they were from maybe a student number, but you wouldn't know who they were.
Yeah.
So it would be tough to track them through their
and you wouldn't be able to
career.
track them to discipline or or major or whatever?
Well, you could once you crosswalked it back with the registrar. They would have
Right.
They would have their
Okay.
major that they graduated with.
So you have to keep your student ID number. No.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Our data set is going to end up being truly massive. So,
It sounds like, Adam, you've really thought this out.
Right,
You're ready to
yeah.
go with the next step.
I'm looking forward to exploring it with our director of assessment.
Are you planning on publishing anything regarding your current study, or?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we have one other set of data looking at a different semester to another semester in terms of retention that we have still in the hopper. It's still the analyst has been working on it for a little bit of time, and she has indicated that the results are even better than what I presented today. So once she finishes up with that and we're able to pull all of those together, my team and I are going to put together an article, and we've been working on a draft of it already. We just need to be able to fill in the charts and graphs and details. But we're hoping to publish it not in a library journal. We're hoping to publish it in something that would hopefully have
Yeah.
more readership by presidents and provosts.
Exactly.
Because they're
Have you
the ones that
identified
need
those
it.
journals?
Well, one that comes to mind is Change.
Okay.
So that's one that we have been looking at, and there are a handful of those that are kind of in that same vein. And one thing that we are going to try to do is once the article is submitted and hopefully accepted, then we'll be putting together an op-ed for the Chronicle or Inside Higher Education that will reference the forthcoming article and really try to stir the pot a little bit. Get this kind of conversation.
Exactly.
Taking place with some visibility. So.
Well, it needs to be taking place within the entire profession, because this is key, being able to connect the library to success, student success, faculty success, I think is key to maintaining the library as being the heart of the university.
Yeah.
Because I think some people are questioning that in this day and age,
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons, and being able to point to these kinds of obvious impacts is extremely helpful. And I would imagine libraries throughout the country would be interested in hearing about how you did that.
Yeah.
Well, several of us were talking after your talk about potentially doing a pre-conference next year, so stay tuned.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you, Adam. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and your talk at the conference just a few minutes ago was fantastic, and we just appreciate you taking your time out of your schedule to come and talk to us here in the penthouse.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.